Okay, y'all. We are here today a little bit after we needed to be. Today's been a really tough day. I'm doing some more because we got other things going on. And Deontay hit me and was just like, should I still go on? It's a lot to process today outside of, you want to call them white militia, white hunters taking over the Capitol in one of the corniest coups probably in not only this nation's history, but the history of coups.
Did you just say a corny coup? Is that what you called it?
Corny coup, yes. Right.
Okay.
So yeah. I've been enjoying it myself. I'm not gonna lie, because the audacity, I think, is the main thing that we're trying to dissect right now. And a lot of people are trying to compare it to what happens to Black Lives Matter protesters, etc. But you guys, there's really a huge difference between Black Lives Matter protesters and the mixture of white supremacists that are out there. We're looking at Trumpers, we're looking at Blue Lives Matter supporters, we're looking at Proud Boys. They have changed their khakis for quite a few guns. What do you say?
I was kind of losing you for a second there, but I got you now.
Yeah, I seen that. Is that they're white men, mostly ran by white men, and we are a Black movement mostly led by Black femmes, trans GNC people, mothers, and a few other folk that are all Black, that are leading movements. I know one of the comparisons is, if you don't also look at the rest of what's happening during these uprisings, what happened to DC at the height of this resistance movement in 2020 was just really unspeakable. DC has 32 different law enforcement agencies, and not one of them made their presence early on to prevent.
I think I lost you again.
Lord, the internet out here just keeps on just fucking up. But anyway, we watched like some very grotesque amount of police violence take place in a lot of these uprising cities, and especially here in Louisville. It was a call I got today, reporting like, what's the difference? They white? Like, stop asking oblivious questions. They white. We knew exactly what they wanted to do. They organized in a Facebook group. They also went buying up all the guns at the gun shows. They got great new camo gear and everything. And here they are staging. This is exactly what they do. It's unfortunate that it got violent, but white supremacy is violent. So I think we have got to stop disassociating violence from white supremacy. It's always been violent, and it will continue to be violent. Deontay hit me and was just like, it's a lot to process today. Not just that shit. We ain't just worried about like what white people need to do. But he was talking about like the news that has been coming back on the most popular police killings, right? Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake, Tamar Rice. It's been 6 years since that baby was taken on a playground by the police in Cleveland, Ohio. And they are still trying to adjudicate officers in that case. So I'm going to go ahead and give it to Deontay. Deontay, go ahead and take it away.
I appreciate everybody for being here, and I appreciate the flexibility for us to start a little late, and on top of that, kind of change the topic of what we're talking about so we can be current and on point. So this is the Sankofa series with me. I'm Dr. Deontay Hollowell, professor of history and African American studies at Spalding University here in Louisville. And today we will be talking about the politics of policing. This is session 4. Chanel, I don't know if you are with me, if you have the PowerPoint up or not, but it really, I guess at this point, doesn't really matter. If you need me to I can go to the next slide, but I'm going to the first one now. Is that good? Well, technically the second one. So again, the topic for today is the politics of police violence. And so I'm of the mind frame that for us to have this discussion about politics and how it plays a role in police violence, we first have to have an agreement on what we mean when we say politics. And so for the sake of this conversation, we are going to view politics as resource distribution. And in other words, I'm defining politics as the games that are played in the name of distributing resources from one group to another. And oftentimes the group that is doing the distribution has no stake in the resources that are being distributed to other people. And so when we look at politics in this way, then we can notice that resources are distributed and could be either economic, legal, social, or even cultural resources. Obviously, today we're talking about those legal and social resources, such as voting. In other words, our very right to vote is protected, or is supposed to be protected, by the Constitution. However, who protects us as we are trying to engage in the voting? That's very important, as we saw here yesterday with the elections that are supposed to be over in the Senate races in Georgia. And we see the difference oftentimes in how people's rights are policed when they're Black. Not only that, but legislation also plays a role in or political role as it pertains to policing. And legislation are the laws that are passed in the name of certain police or certain legal ideas that are supposed to either benefit police or benefit the people. And of course, we are supposed to abide by these laws. And after the actual voting happens, that's when these laws are put into place. Also, we see politics trickle down into policy. Now, policy is different than legislation. Legislation is legal, policy is more social. So when we have things like ordinances, for instance, when they say you can't SAG, or when we talk about policing in the schools, these are more policy oriented. But again, we still see politics kind of trickling down into these policies. And then finally, it's the media. And we talked about the media last week in journalism, but the media kind of encapsulates how the other three entities are portrayed to the people. So in other words, how is it portrayed to the masses when Black people are struggling for voting rights? Or how are the laws and legislation and policies portrayed to the people when it's time to actually either support them or deny support for them? So these are some of the things that I've kind of been thinking about in the wake of all of the news that we've been getting in the last week or so, 4 or 5 days, as Chanel kind of pointed out. So this is a little chart here that kind of gives us an even broader scope of politics and the different associations that we have, whether it's society, relationships, the government, and especially power. These are some of the things that are important as we are seeking to understand how politics can be a part of our discussion about police violence. Chanel, we're going to go to the next slide there, if you're with me. And if anybody has any questions or comments, I'm good with that. So let's take a look at history. Sankofa, of course, and a quick recap. Chanel, if you are still with me, of Sankofa is that Sankofa is the process of historical recovery that governs how we as African people should view the world. If you can see the screen, the Sankofa bird is portrayed as facing forward, but with its beak backwards, and it represents historical recovery in the face of knowing your past in order to make your present better. And this caption here says that the Sankofa bird reminds us that we must continue to move forward as we remember our past. And at the same time, we plant a seed for the future generations that come after us. So I wanted to look back at a specific case that happened in Greensboro in the year that I was born in, 1979. And the situation was called the Greensboro Massacre. And it was one of the first cases in which police were actually convicted of killing unarmed Black people. And so I'm going to play this video that goes into depth about the Greensboro Massacre. But keep in mind that it wasn't until decades later that those who were guilty were actually convicted. And those were KKK members. So hopefully, Chanel, I got a couple of minutes to go into this video. And I don't know if people can see it.
Yeah, give me a second. I think I have to click it on my end.
Okay, do you need me to send you the link?
To a new video. Yeah, is it popping up? No, I got to share that one. Oops.
And in the interest of time, we don't have to. All right, is that it right there?
Yeah, no, we can. What else? What they doing?
Okay. So I can go ahead and click play?
No, I can click play. It's on my screen. I got to do it from here.
Okay.
And you let me know if you need me to like stop or anything.
Okay. So you let me know when you get when it's up there, and I'll be so I can see, so we can watch it.
Okay, it's up here. Can you see from a different view? Can you watch from in the dashboard? You see it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And just let me know if I need to stop anywhere.
Okay. Oh, this is it turned up?
Yeah. This is busing, y'all. This is what it looked like when kids was trying to go to school in busing.
There should be some commentary though. Okay. See what I mean? But just if you see what's going on there, what you see is Black people and whites of good conscience. A lot of them who were associated with socialist movements back then in the late 70s and early 80s were reacting to non-response to police, where some, again, Blacks and whites of good conscience were violently attacked by the KKK. And so, again, it was in Greensboro, North Carolina, 1979. And it wasn't for years later until there was a conviction, but there was a conviction. and you can kind of see the chaos and melee that was going on kind of in the background. But the process of Sankofa is that which allows us to kind of take a look at what was going on even back this far and see the effects it had on the city. If you're not familiar with, they actually ended up having a Truth and Reconciliation project based on this particular case, which is how originally there were 2 acquittals and those got overturned. But again, you can see the police violence that's being done there. But in the city of Greensboro, as a result of this here, you had the establishment of what is known as I'm drawing a blank here. The Beloved Community Center, the BCC, which is a local church there in Greensboro. And one of the person that's the pastor, Nelson Johnson, I don't know if they're going to show his image. He was actually shot in this situation here. And he was actually pretty cool with Dr. King too, back in the day. But they have the Beloved Community Center, which is a church, but it's also kind of like a hub for protecting people against police violence. And I've been there once, and I got a pretty good relationship with the people there. But check this out right here. If you can see it in the background, the CWP is one of those white organizations. But let me see that. I highly recommend Love and Revolution. Let's see walk if you want to learn more. Thank you. I appreciate that, Sylvie Chambers. Absolutely. But this march in Greensboro was called the Death of the KKK. And this is like where you can see our people, man, Black people being real serious about the work that needed to be done to stop. There it is, Death to the KKK. And so you see they had a conference in the whole 9 back then. But yeah, that's a good thing there. If you want to, Chanel, since the sound is off, we can move on to the next thing, or you can let it play. I'll let that reside with you.
Is the sound?
I can't hear sound, but there's a white woman in the background narrating. I'm probably doing a better job of her though. No, I'm just playing.
Oh, I don't know. I guess because it's on my computer, I can hear. I'm sending the link into the chat for folks.
Cool.
So I want y'all to see her on this part. I think it's like 5 minutes and 13 in. If people can't hear, I feel like people can hear. That's just me. Look, because I can hear it. No, but what she states is, and I think this is poignant for today. So please watch this. Thank you, Deontay, for having this, because what she says is the police were not there. They felt like they should have had a low presence day. She names it something because they felt like if their presence were there, heightened danger would have arisen.
Yeah.
5 people were shot around a children's march labeled Death to the Klan because they are tired of racism. It is not even tired anymore. It's because racism and white supremacy. Let's go ahead and name it. Like I was telling somebody, we've been doing interviews all day. That's the name that we need to be giving these things instead of keep having these soft conversations around privilege. That's not privilege, what you see scaling the wall at the House or the Senate. That's not privilege of somebody with tattoos on his body and a freaking raccoon hat on, taking pictures behind it. It's not privilege stealing the podium. That's not privilege. That's white supremacy. It was built for them to do the things that they are doing. I'm like, remember that this entire supposed nation is built off one of the corniest protests of throwing tea into the harbor, like tea that you're going to sell to get a profit off of. You're mad at representation and taxation, so you throw the tea into the harbor.
And they're dressed up like Native Americans.
It's native. Yeah. dressed up as natives. And so what she's saying
And set
here
stuff
in
on
North
fire
Carolina,
too. Don't forget that.
and shot a black person first. We can't forget, shot a black person first
Yeah, American
so that
Revolution.
they can have the first shots off. So your first dead person is a black person at the birth of the war around this nation. So they sit back. When we say defund the police, we're saying defund white terrorism. We're saying defund police terrorism, policing that manifests itself when it wants to. DC has 32 different law enforcement agencies, and not one of them thought they was gonna come out and do whatever. Then they get people looking like SWAT walking up. These things are manifested, these things are practiced, these things are historical. And they've been here since the inception of this nation. And they will do that at the death of us. And that is something that we have to know. They will do this at the death of you. Go ahead. Y'all sure somebody, Precious, can y'all hear this? Thank you.
It could be you know how I am. It could be anything.
I know how it is. That's why I'm here, y'all. Doing the show itself.
But look, so I got this other thing, right? There's this professor of criminal justice studies out of Bowling Green University, and he is again, I don't know if you can see my screen, but Bowling Green State, my bad. But he came out with this kind of manifesto, I guess, looking at on-duty police shootings and trying to come up, and he came up with some data about between 2005 and 2019. And this is Philip Stinson, by the way. And it just talks about the prevalence of police killings, where in the time of this study, there were 104 non-federal sworn law enforcement officers that were arrested for on-duty shootings. Now, of those arrests, only 35 were convicted. And the numbers get even lower when you talk about how many of those that were convicted of killing black people. But interestingly enough, there were 6 black officers of that 35 that were convicted. And in that situation, there were 7 black victims. And so it just shows the discrepancy. And I think even when we talk about today, what's going on up in DC, where I don't recall seeing the SWAT team or federal police or anything like that up there. I haven't looked in a while. Maybe they're there now. But it just shows you how the expectations are different. So in this case, there were 29 non-black officers convicted, and 6 again black officers that were convicted. The victims in the cases of the 29 convicted non-black officers, or white, I wish they would just say that. 19 of those victims were black. And in the case of the ones that were not convicted, 21 were black. And so again, that just kind of goes to show the discrepancy. That article I also sent you, Chanel. You can put the link on there if you want to. Were there any comments or questions about
Let me check.
that study? Okay.
No, not that one. I think everybody was just really into the conversation.
Okay. Now, obviously, again, we're on here today, and we had supposedly we're going to have conversation about more about the media and stuff like that. But when these new developments started to happen within the last week or so, I thought it was important for us to take a look at what was going on. And so I forget which day of the week it was last week when they came out with the news that the police officer who killed Tamir Rice had been exonerated. And I just wanted to kind of go back to that particular case and talk about what actually did happen. I guess word has it, this was in Cleveland, Ohio, by the way, and word has it that Tamir Rice had traded his cell phone for that toy gun. You ever heard that part of it, Chanel?
No, I have not. And you know, BLM Cleveland is actually his folk, so that's cute.
Say that again.
BLM Cleveland is actually his people's, so that's real cute.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so Tamir Rice was killed in 2014 by police officer Timothy Loman, who was 26 years old at the time. Tamir Rice was 12. And I guess he got a report that there was someone playing with a gun outside the community center. And the police officer comes to the scene and shoots and kills Tamir Rice. Full disclosure, in my research that I do, I was able to visit Cleveland. I don't know if you knew that or not, Chanel. But I went there probably about, even though Mike Brown happened after Tamir Rice, I believe I ended up in Cleveland after I wound up in Ferguson. It kind of wound up weird. But when I went to that community center, you know, they would not let, they have a gag order, so to speak, there, where they do not allow anyone to speak about Tamir Rice or his case to anybody. And the memorial that they have for him outside where he was killed, they wouldn't even let you take pictures of it. Well, you were supposed to not take pictures of it. I see pictures of it all the time, so I guess folks doing what they want to do. But the context in which Tamir Rice was killed was interesting. If we go back to 2014, there was not as much protest behind, and still to me, I think there wasn't enough attention placed on this case. But it seems like there was more attention in the Mike Brown case than there was for Tamir Rice. And I think one of the reasons why that's the case, when I went there, I found out that in Cleveland, first of all, Cleveland is one of those towns that I would almost call a black town, even though it's not majority black. It's got enough black people there.
No, it is 70% black.
What do you say? What now?
It's 70% black.
Cleveland is?
Yes.
Golly, I didn't know that. Shoot. But, okay, so then I'm right then. So, and it's evidenced by what I'm about to say then, Chanel. Cleveland had some black political participation that they expected would put pressure on the city in order to handle this killing, this murder of this boy. And obviously, unfortunately, 6 years later, it didn't work out. But in if you compare it to, say, a Ferguson, that sense of trust wasn't there. And so that's why you see the rioting or uprisings, if you will. And in Cleveland, you didn't see much of that. Moving on.
You also, I do want to raise up though too, what we also see. I think Louisville experienced a lot of this, and we need to name it. There are outside folks that come in to push a certain narrative too. And so in the early days of Ferguson, you saw lots of people trying to get some screen time coming in, etc., like that. Tamir is shot in November of that year. So Mike Brown is shot in August. Tamir is shot in November. And then you see the delay. Like, we're talking about Tamir Rice today because we see the delay in his case.
Right.
We see this is 6 years that we're talking about what is happening to the murderer of Tamir Rice, a police officer. So you see a bit of what you see in Kentucky. You got a lot of people pushing reform where we don't really need reform being pushed. We really need folks to be focused on what it means to build, because what we saw when we went up there was that a massive amount of gentrification was taking place. So the neighborhood in which Tamir was playing in has been seeing a lot of racial management, and not only racial management, I want to say economic management as well. So people who are relatively poor are being pushed out. Gentrification is taking place, so that means new money is coming in to create a new economy whatsoever. One of the in that community, an 80-something-year-old woman who owned a few other apartment buildings there was brutally murdered, a few months after Tamir. So then we start seeing a decline in that neighborhood of resources and things. That community center and his mom trying to preserve as much as they can of the things that happened. So they got the gazebo out of there. It has been placed in a museum. It has served as a shrine to Tamir. People had written all over it, had flowers there. People come visit it from out of town.
Yeah, when I went out there, people was disrespecting it. I hate to say that, but they just the kids. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, and that was another reason why she moved it. And she moved it. She moved it for her child, who also, Sam Rice is an organizer and has created a foundation and a nonprofit with brick and mortar for her son. So please check into that. Actually, I'm gonna look it up and I'll send the links out.
Shoot, this sounds like I need to go back to Cleveland there. But I didn't know that you knew that you were familiar with, all the players and stuff like that.
Yeah, of course.
Of course. I guess I should have hit you up when I went up there too. But so not a couple of days after, when was this, today or yesterday, did we hear about the Jacob Blake situation? Yesterday?
Yes, yesterday, because today is we're supposed to be celebrating Black women and Black women organizers and Latinx organizers, pushing through, getting McConnell out of power in the Senate, and then of course white people. But yeah, it was yesterday.
Well, they definitely know when to drop some news, however they decide to do that. But so Jacob Blake, if we go back to that situation, is a young man who was shot 7 times, man, by police. And I'm telling you, I don't be watching those videos. So I've never seen it. I've never seen the George Floyd. I don't have to watch all of that. I've seen that movie enough times already. But in Jacob Blake's case, they tried to say he had a knife, but I think he had like a box cutter or some stuff, or some knife or something small like that. And he was.
I don't think he had shit. He was handling the situation. He left and then was walking to his car right within his natural right. You have the natural right to go seek shelter. Right. I don't think people think about that when we think about human rights. We always want to talk about civil rights or human rights, and all of that is well and good if you want to adhere to what government you're underneath, right? Like, let's really talk about what it means to have natural rights. We joke about it, eat shit and sleep, piss, and whatever else. But that's your natural right to do that. You have the right to do that, to sleep where you need to be, to where you seek shelter, etc. He was doing an incident. The incident got out of range. He's removing himself from the incident. So he is seeking shelter. At the time that you feel unsafe, you have the right to seek shelter. This is also a reproductive justice right. We talk about that a lot. What is the access that people have to those things and stuff? And he goes and he gets in his car and they just shoot him up.
Yep. And so now the officer involved, because he was shot by one officer, and that officer has been, the shooting has been justified. And meanwhile, he lays up in Kenosha, paralyzed, and justice for him wasn't served. It's going to be interesting to see as time progresses what Jacob Blake actually makes out of this situation. Because you don't hear about too many high-profile cases like this where the victim actually lives and is coherent and is able to, I guess, articulate the amount of pain and the amount of suffering that's going on. So again, this was 2 back-to-back, Tamir Rice, Jacob Blake, both murdered by Again, Tamir Rice murdered by police, Jacob Blake shot, and both justified. Then we get to Louisville. What happens here? Was this today or yesterday? I lose track. Maybe it was today. But we find out that 2 more officers fired in the Breonna Taylor case, but
We found out last week, and then they completed the official duty this week.
okay.
And then I think what's more identifiable of calling this white supremacy, the police officers send out letters to their folks about to warn them about whatever. They're not warning them about shit. They're calling them to attention and they're calling them to a stance. We see this happen with the FOP president back in 2015. He calls out race baiters, but then he calls for others to rise up. And since then, here locally, we start seeing the rising of certain groups, including the 3%ers, who we've identified to being a part of different police forces within Louisville. So when you see their numbers and they're low and you're laughing at that, please be sure that they are out there really numbered really high, because tons of them sit on the police forces and they're working right alongside white supremacists because they are white supremacists.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about for a second what's being left out of this. If 2 more officers are fired, and by the way, being a fired police officer, there are worse positions you could be in, to say the least. It seems as though police officers are pretty dang on good at getting jobs in new places. But what is left out of this? In other words, there seems to be one officer at least that's kind of operating above the fray in this situation. Am I wrong about that, Chanel?
Oh, absolutely not. First of all, there are several and probably tens of officers that need to be fired. One of the most important things that we're missing is that, and to keep up with the narrative, something that we've really been pushing for folks to understand is that these officers, forget the whole administrative pay on leave and all of that shit, these officers will be fired and keep their pensions. So this is one of the only occupations where you can fuck up, get fired, and keep the money that you made while doing a job that you fucked up at. Please let me know another one. And then like this entire movement will stop utilizing that call to action for defunding. But that is exactly what needs to happen next. Fight to push against those pensions. Some of those pensions are exactly the salary that like some of these nonprofit folks need to have to do the work they're already doing for free, taking care of their communities. This is also something that we know that is desperately needed at those type of fundings for communities that they've probably adjudicated over. And at the end of the day, like what happened to Breonna Taylor and several other folks in Louisville, especially those that have been murdered by police, whether up in the drug world or not. And I'm not saying Breonna was a part of the drug world. I'm just talking about the work that they do, the war on Black people, this war around drugs in the Black community is terrorism. You put the product there. You put boundaries around these communities and these neighborhoods, and then you go in there hunting people like dogs and shit. So we are seeing where like people are coming to terms with that. But what you got on here? You got Erica after the other developments. That's fine. Let's talk about this bitch anyway. How
okay.
How in the world are you going to find somebody who did a worse job than our PR rep Conrad as a police chief? I want to save the words that I have for Black women, and I'll do that in another space. But I just want to say that there has been mounds and mounds of police misconduct all throughout LMPD, and we are forgetting about a lot of the people who stood there by as people were abused, murdered, and elsewhere. If we want to talk about what accountability looks like, it looks like from within to say, hey, look, you didn't fuck up. You have got to get right. We cannot produce whatever facade we're trying to produce and think that the city or in the city, I mean the entity, and the people that we represent are going to trust us. They're not thinking that way because that's not their goal. So here we got this helper. She comes here from Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
We are talking about either the same amount or even more. The nature of which crime exists with Black folks, a continuation of a hit up of a gentrified group space west end of Atlanta is just as blighted as the West End of Louisville. And then she gets up here with this 1998 hairdo talking about how soft and sorry she is and, doing the right things and maybe how is it that our city misses the mark on any time that its citizens needs to know who needs to be put into what position? And then they continue to keep talking in this space of like the Synergy Project, making it so we can build trust between the police and the communities. Why isn't there trust in the first place? Don't answer that question. We know
Right.
why there isn't trust there. So let's stop playing around. Let's actually start getting to work. If you think that the police shouldn't be there, let's start talking about that because that's what we got to do first. We got to discuss ways in which we are accountable, safe, and secure, and then what it's going to take for us to build that in our communities. If we can do that with our children, I know that we can do that in these other communities where other folks lie. And I mean, like, what does it look like in our food justice communities? What does it look like in our environmental communities? Things like that. Things like that. Let's break it down so that we're actually building safety. So that, like, that just really pissed me off. I got to look at this white funky ass heifer as a chief of police for LMDC. Like, really? Okay, come on, LMPD.
Now what about Rayshard Brooks?
Do we need to bring up that situation? Let me see if I can bring that up. Hold on,
No, I
I'll be
mean, in
right
other words, I'm just saying that was the brother that was killed at Wendy's in the
right.
African.
I want to make sure people remember what that is because I know a lot of folks paid attention to what was happening here in Louisville, and we try
Right.
to make sure people understand that, like, one killing doesn't mean that's when we revolt. It's the fact that there have been numerous amounts of killings. LMPD had killed 5 people within a year's time. And immediately after Breonna killed somebody 2 weeks later, and then 3 weeks later puts out a call that kills David McAtee. Like, I want you all to like notice in the ways that they keep making sure that these things happen. So when you see it again, you don't get all shocked and, oh my God. No, you get like, we got to get rid of them. I'm gonna go grab that. You go ahead and talk about it because it was not Erica that did that. I'm not going to call her Shields.
But yeah, I was just intrigued by first of all, I guess the fact that I knew that we were going to have a new police chief hired. I didn't expect it to happen so fast. I know that Yvette Gentry was placed or actually accepted the position on kind of an interim kind of situation. And so, but again, I was kind of surprised that it kind of happened today. And then you think about the person that it was who they hired, and again, she comes from Atlanta, but not black, and is interesting that a city like Atlanta wouldn't have at that particular point a black female police chief, but still, when the situation happened with Rayshard Brooks, that is the time also in which Erica Shields chose to actually leave or to resign. And so that makes me wonder why we would entertain having that person to serve in the same capacity here in Louisville. Are you looking up something, Chanel? I was gonna have you to check out this the YouTube site there so we can check on some of your step cousins up in DC and see what they're up to. So yeah, I was saying, Chanel, if you click on that link there above Erica Shields, we can check on some of your family members up in DC and see how they doing. Look like they just chilling right now. It's got dark.
I mean,
Okay,
that's what they've been doing, right? They've been chilling.
yeah. Look like they got some company out there.
Yeah, they came out about like 3 hours ago, I think.
Okay, I must have missed
Tried to
that.
show up.
But
Yeah.
you know, I peeped out how, like, I would say at least 65, 70% of the people out there did not have on masks. Now, I'm looking at some of them got them on now. But I'm talking about when I first started watching, it was like just plain face out there. And I'm like, man, these people don't care. So,
Yeah, so the people that you're seeing now, most of those are journalists. Some of these folks down here, I know it's a bit crazy to see journalists look like protesters, but I mean, hey, y'all watched that during the entire this uprising, and it happens. So they're watching. Now they want to protect these buildings. Now they want to. I see there's a helicopter light over on the building over there. They must be looking for somebody. Now they want to protect white supremacy.
So
if
look,
we know the story about the White House, then we know that the rest of these buildings have also been made by Black and brown labor, stolen labor, and then also the folks that have had to come up through the years and produce this monumental space we call our Capitol.
I remember the first time I went to Ferguson to a protest, I called you. I don't know if you remember what you told me, but I do. You said, you said, watch and see when they start the protest. You said how it was going to be small and how it was going to grow and grow and grow, and then somebody in the crowd something was going to happen in the crowd, whether it was a fight or some kind of diversion or something like that, and then it was going to be over. And that exact thing that you said happened. So I always wonder how you knew that, but I guess just being experienced and being in that space that many times. But what do you think is about to happen here?
I know that by the nature in what skill level the protester has. So there's training to protest. And the reason why we saw Ferguson pop off the way we did is because anytime these protests are taking place within the neighborhood, within the community of the people who need to protest, we've seen that throughout the years. I mean, and I did do that. You know, I'm a geographer. So I studied the way the protest popped off in the 60s. We get in Watts, the mama gets mad, somebody throws something, there's a distraction, and then all hell breaks loose. Well, that happens in like 30 something other cities across the nation in 68. It also happened in Louisville. 2 people get killed by the police. Folks get out there. What's crazy and ironic is that the Black Six, a group of folks, 2 of them who have been enthralled and immersed in the Black Panthers, a husband and wife who are Sherry Bryan Hampton's, one of our ex-council people's parents, and a few others, one who goes on to become the chairperson of Louisville Metro Housing Authority for a number of years, began to be the face and the leaders of these protests. Now, mind you, they are not the people who are doing a lot of the things. They are very vocal in the organizing of policy in other places, in community serving, etc. But they get blamed for the majority of the protests. We see that happen when there's not an organized protest set. You saw that in Louisville, and you've seen that in several other places. So while it's been really invigorating to keep having people going and stuff, and actually stand up for what they believe in, like not having the actual narrative as to why you're out there, what's going to defeat them, how to meet them with power, and how to build power is something that they bank off of. Look at them. They're doing that today. That happened with these protesters. They were able to make it because they white. I know a number of us have been to the Capitol, and you've been turned away at the door for, not having this on, and not having that, not having your ID. I know here at Kentucky's Capitol, I've been turned away for not having my ID. You're not getting ready to tell me that the militiamen showed their ID before they got into the Capitol. You know what I'm saying?
No, they show that.
So white supremacy is allowing themselves to do whatever the fuck they want to do, and we can keep on complying to their laws and rules that do not fit us. They just don't.
That brings up something that we can end it here. That it just makes me think, and I'm talking like big picture. Why are these people out there? Now, obviously, the most of them will say Trump, 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 Trump. But why, for real, are they out there?
Because they can. I think we always look, there's always a reason why we have to give something, why we got to do something right. We kind of learn it in school. We've been talking about it during these organizer trainings. Schools just make kids dumb, et cetera. Yeah, but they also makes kids submissive. As soon as they start sharing their opinion, they're wrong or they're being disciplined for it. As soon as they do something smarter than the teacher gets mad, they get disciplined for it. This starts at a very early age, right? And so we're always asking questions because we always think that there has to be a reason. We are learning that white supremacy doesn't need a reason. Even in the questions that they troll us with, well, what about the person that was killed? And what about this? And we answer it every day in and day out. I'm watching people talk to trolls. Why? Why put yourself through that stress? Why not just build? Why ignore them and then continue to do the things that we're going to do? Because they're going to do what they want to do. They're going to do exactly what it is that they want to do because they can. They have built this world for them because they can.
And it just makes me imagine how I don't anticipate this happening very long. I don't. But let's just say they wanted it to. A lot of these people out here probably have the means to be out there as long as they want. You know.
They don't.
You say that they do?
No, they don't. Who we're seeing is, and we joke, seeing people who are just like us, and I mean economically, right? Some of these folks are coming way out of some homes that are barely making it. They also too are hit by small stimulus packages. They're really upset that Trump was put in office and they thought it was going to make a way for them. I've seen multiple different types of white supremacists out here. When I was watching the film earlier, it was kind of confusing to me. There was no unity among them, just joining together because that was your goal, to make fun of Trump doesn't really or try to say stop the steal doesn't really build unity. Just because it's like a weak ass coalition, right? Just because you join together with somebody in so-called solidarity doesn't mean you have the principles and the tactics to keep it going. So that's what you're seeing. The only thing that they all could agree on in one moment was, oh hey, somebody's going to take the Capitol, let's go ahead and get it. And so that's what they did. That's not a lot of people either. I want to name that. These rallies and these pivotal points that we're watching where white supremacists are getting together, they're not a lot of people. They really are not
as many as it could be.
No, and it's not going to be. I want to name that. I want people to actually know that white supremacists, while they are here and they are able to gather the resources that they can a little bit more easily than us, are not really here in large numbers. People are not really here for this shit. People really do want to have natural rights. They want to have human rights. They want to be able to know that their family can get by, and they know that this shit is not serving them. One group of white supremacists. And then you have who are out here who really do believe in Trumpers. But you see a split in that because we are watching as Trump really did try to take this office, really did try to forever move forward and build a legion of folks. But the legion that he can't compete with is the government. The government is his own legion. It is not answering to their one person representative.
He's still trying.
I mean, it looks like it's trying. If we really understand how these political moments even move, I think that's interesting. I'd like to know what Noam Chomsky is saying. We can keep talking about super spreading too. Somebody's talking about COVID-19 and super spreading and all of that. Yeah, they didn't have masks.
That's what I meant. Yeah, I didn't see too many people with masks out there. I don't see no stations set up like they do have at all the black protests I've been to. Is all right, you can come get your sanitizer over here and this, that, and the third. It's just like you said, it seems kind of ad hoc, kind of last minute, and disjointed, disorganized.
All the oppositional white supremacist actions this year have been disjointed. And dare I even say, but I can't say that because I took part in it. The oppositional march, White Supremacy, Fight Supremacy in Boston after the Charlottesville march kind of put a damper on how they would need to gather. That was 68 planned, announced marches. And so now they're trying to do these marches really rapidly and these actions really rapidly. And they're just failing because there's just no plan. There's no scope. There's no anything. We've been in a few of their groups too because they organize on Facebook. So it's so funny. And they're just mad. They're just mad for no reason. They come up with any excuse to even do anything. They've been organizing for a while, and it's just really pathetic. that they thought this was the thing to do. All it did was, one, take away the news away from like black organizers and Latinx organizers in Georgia, and all the wonderful organizing that they've been doing, and what this is going to look like for the future. So I'd rather it talked about that than these hoes climbing up the wall, running around in fucking raccoon hats and shit.
I can dig that. So I didn't necessarily have any more thoughts there. We kind of ran through what I wanted to talk about. Was there anything else you wanted to say, or any comments? I know that, again, shout out to everybody that got involved down there in Georgia. I was supposed to go down there, but that didn't happen. But
Okay.
definitely shout. And obviously they got the job done, but shout out to them. I'm not a Democrat at all. I don't even like Democrats. Matter of fact, I probably like black Democrats less. Let me stop. But I am.
He said what he said.
Yeah,
He
and it's
said
cool.
what he
Oh,
said.
yeah, they know
No,
that.
if we want to talk about that, we are 57 minutes. Yeah, let's go. Let's add that for next week. We're going to add it for next week. We're
What's
going to
that?
talk about black liberals.
Ooh, you're gonna make some people mad.
2 weeks from now.
You don't consider yourself a black liberal?
Hell no. Goodbye. I ended the broadcast. Ended the broadcast.
All right. But yeah, I think we can do that. Let's talk about black liberalism and the politics of policing to go along with that. I'm definitely down.
I like that. Okay, dope. I'm ending the broadcast. Stop talking.